All right, so now we're going to have a look at some line graphs. Line graphs aren't scary. I mean, I don't know what your maths teachers have been teaching you, but I tend to think that line graphs are pretty okay to deal with. A couple of things that we need to be wary of when we're looking at a line graph is that sometimes they can spring on us, some information about something we've never heard of before. And that's okay, because what they're testing is not your knowledge of what the content is of the graph, what's being plotted, but actually just how to read the graph itself. So let's have a look at a couple of things on this graph. We've got a fairly wordy introduction, and we've got two axes with different data variables mapped out on each one. So this is a graph of average annual maximum temperatures at Heathrow Airport in London across about a 60-year period. So on the vertical axis, we've got the average annual maximum temperature. So the average is just average data. Annual is another term for yearly, and maximum temperature. Along the horizontal axis, we've got the year. And something that I really like about this particular graph is that each year, if you can see this in the video, there's a slightly thicker vertical line that they each every 10 years lines up with. And in between, we've got different spacings for individual years, much like millimeters in between a centimeter on your ruler. So, two practice questions. Let's decode them, see if they make sense to us, and we'll see if we can answer them. So question 1, what was the average annual maximum temperature in 1983? So something I'll just point out first of all is that if you ever get a bit confused or a bit overwhelmed with some of the language which is used in questions, much like the ones that I've just underlined, it can look a bit overwhelming. And this is the part where you might scratch your head and say, well, I have no idea what that means. Even if you don't know what the question, these long words in the question mean, just look for them on the graph somewhere, because remember, it's got something to do with the graph. So if I look for these words, average annual maximum temperature, even without knowing what that means, I know that if I look at this vertical scale, it's just referring to one of the values on the vertical scale here. So by looking for this key on the vertical scale that's labeled, I know that I'm looking for average annual maximum temperature, whatever that happens to be, and then I need to line it up with the year of 1983. So here I've got the year 1980, and I'm just going to highlight that line. And then I've got 1985. These are the two labelled years which are nearby to the one that I'm looking for. If I follow this, that's 1980, 1981, 82, 83. So that third mark that I've made, if I extend that up, I reach the plotted line. And if I then take that over to the vertical scale to see what that equals, I end up at 14. So my answer is going to be 14, but if I wrote that, I might not necessarily get the marks. I need to make sure that I put the unit of measurement, and we can see that underneath the scale label for the vertical scale, degrees Celsius, and that matches up with the idea that I was looking for a temperature all along. Question 2 is meant to be a multiple choice, and it's a little bit of a wordy question, so let's break it down. So we're looking for which statement, and we've got 4 statements in the multiple choice to choose from. Which statement best describes? So when we see words like this, best describes, that means that we're not looking for an exact answer. We're looking for the best one out of these 4. So you don't need to come up with a whole new answer. You're just looking to pick one of these, which is the best of the 4. 3 of them are probably going to be wrong, very clearly wrong, hopefully. And a 4th one, even if you don't 100% agree with it, it's probably still going to be the only one that makes a bit of sense. So which statement of these 4 is the best at describing the information on this line graph? So if we have a look at the line graph, and we might make our own visual patterns out of it, But basically what I see, and I might just switch back to a different color here, is that between different years it does definitely rise, but then on other years it does fall. So there's no consistent pattern that I see in terms of how often does it rise and fall. We might be able to calculate how many years does it rise and fall, but I don't need to go to all that effort, because I just need to read through these 4 statements and pick which ones are right and which ones are wrong and look for the best right one. Okay, temperatures increased from 1980 to 1985. So let's have a look. We were actually just dealing with that before. So from 1980 to 1985, so I found those before. Did the temperatures between these 2 points increase? Well, no, they didn't increase. They actually went down slightly. So that would mean that that statement is wrong. So I'm going to cross that out. Statement B, temperatures decreased from 1965 to 1970. So if I go back here and find 1965 here and 1970, I'm looking to see if their temperatures decreased. Well, no, they actually increased over time. So that one's wrong. Statement C, temperatures generally, so this is a very vague term, but in general, did they increase over time? Well, just to go back to my initial thoughts, it did increase some years and decrease, but if I look at it, and I know I've muddied it up by putting marks on it, if I look at it over time, we start down here, and then every so often, although it goes up and down, we are still, generally speaking, rising. So if I put a line of best fit between all these points, it's probably like that. So over time, from 1950 up to 2010, it kind of does look like they're generally increasing. So that statement is a maybe. Maybe. Let's double check the last one to see if it's right or wrong, and then we'll make our judgment. Temperatures remained the same over time. Well, I think we've just pointed out that they went up and down, so they did not remain the same. So that one's definitely wrong. So the most correct answer that best describes the information in this graph has got to be C. Even if we don't agree that it's always increased over time, it has generally increased over time. So look for the best answer in multiple choice, not one that you think, or the information that you think should be in there. We only have to deal with the 4 that are presented to us.